Have you ever wondered how the teachings of just one person, the Buddha, could branch out into this incredible, diverse, global tradition we see today? I mean, from the quiet monasteries in Thailand to these amazing, vibrant temples in Tibet, Buddhism has so many different faces. So, let's get into it. How did this all happen?
Yeah, that's really the big question we're going to tackle. It kind of feels like a puzzle, right? One teacher, one set of ideas, but it results in traditions that can look so different from each other. So how did things spread out so much over hundreds of years and across entire continents? We're going to follow the breadcrumbs and see exactly how it all went down.
Okay, so here's the plan. First, we'll look at the huge challenge of just trying to preserve the Buddha's original teachings. Then, we're going to take a tour through the three main branches that grew out of it: Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. Simple as that. All right, so let's start at the beginning. The story really kicks off right after the Buddha passed away, and his followers, well, they had a massive task on their hands. Just think about it. How do you keep a whole spiritual legacy alive when not a single word of it was ever written down?
You know, for generations, it was all based on memory. That's it. The Buddhist teachings were passed down entirely through chanting and reciting them out loud. People like his disciple Ananda were basically walking, talking libraries. They were famous for their incredible ability to remember his talks word for word. It was a living tradition, literally.
And this timeline really helps us see how things started to branch out. Right after the Buddha died, his followers got together for what's called the First Buddhist Council, basically to agree on what the teachings were. But then, as Buddhism started to spread across Asia, different groups naturally started to interpret things in their own way. And here's the real kicker. The first written texts didn't show up for centuries. By that point, a lot of these different schools were already well established.
So, as you can imagine, hundreds of different schools popped up over time. And to make sense of it all, scholars usually group them into three main branches, or what they call vehicles. You can think of them like the major highways of Buddhist thought. They all started from the same place, but took people in slightly different directions.
So this table is kind of our cheat sheet for the rest of this. First, you've got Theravada, which means the doctrine of the elders, and its big idea is individual liberation. Then there's Mahayana, the great vehicle, which is all about liberating everyone. And finally, Vajrayana, the diamond vehicle, which is known for its more, let's say, specialized or mystical practices. So let's dive into each one, shall we?
All right, let's start with Theravada. This is the one that's considered to be one of the oldest schools, often seen as the path followed by the original senior monks.
I mean, the name itself, Theravada, tells you everything you need to know. Its whole mission is to preserve the doctrine of the elders. It's really all about trying to stick as closely as possible to the earliest teachings we have from the historical Buddha.
So what does that look like in practice? Well, the core focus is on the individual. The main text they follow is the Pali Canon. And the ultimate goal for someone practicing Theravada is to become an arahant. That's someone who has reached enlightenment and is totally free from the cycle of suffering and rebirth. And because it's spread from India down to the south, you'll often hear it called Southern Buddhism. It's really big in places like Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Cambodia.
And look, this isn't just some dusty old history. Theravada is a really vibrant, living tradition today. A perfect example is Ajahn Brahm. He's a very well-known monk who's teaching these ancient ideas to a global audience right now.
Okay, on to our next big branch. Around the 1st century or so, a sort of reform movement started to bubble up. This is what we now call Mahayana Buddhism. And it wasn't just a random split, it really came from a philosophical shift. Some people started to feel that the main path at the time was a bit too narrow, you know? It seemed to focus almost entirely on monks getting their own liberation.
Mahayana actually means the great vehicle, and that name is so important. The idea was that this was a bigger vehicle, one that could carry everybody to enlightenment, not just monks, but regular people too. The focus totally shifts from just you, the individual, to the liberation of all living beings. It's a path built on this idea of universal compassion.
And here's a huge difference: the ideal person to become. In Mahayana, it's the Bodhisattva. This is someone who has reached enlightenment but makes a choice to delay their own final nirvana just so they can stay behind and help everyone else get there. This was a really big deal, a direct contrast to the Theravada ideal of the arahant. For Mahayana followers, the idea of seeking enlightenment only for yourself, well, that could almost be seen as a little selfish. The Bodhisattva was a higher, more compassionate goal. This tradition uses different scriptures, written in Sanskrit, and it spread north, becoming huge in East and Central Asia. This is where we get well-known schools like Zen.
And to bring this into our world, just think of the late Thich Nhat Hanh. He was a global spiritual leader, a peace activist, and one of the most beloved Zen masters in the Mahayana tradition. His work has touched millions and millions of people all over the world.
Okay, time for our third and final branch, Vajrayana, which you might also know as Tantric Buddhism. This is often seen as an evolution that grew out of Mahayana, but it has its own really unique and powerful set of methods.
The name Vajrayana means the diamond vehicle, which is such a cool name. It's meant to suggest a path that's super powerful, crystal clear, and indestructible, just like a diamond. It basically builds on Mahayana philosophy, but it introduces a very specific set of practices. Some call them esoteric or specialized, that are designed to speed up the path to enlightenment. The goal is to get there in a single lifetime.
So what really makes Vajrayana different is its focus on active, hands-on, ritualistic practice. It's based on mystical texts called tantras, and it really depends on a direct line of teaching passed down from a master to a student. The practices themselves are incredibly rich and symbolic. We're talking about things like performing specific hand gestures called mudras, meditating on these intricate geometric designs called mandalas, visualizing Buddhas in your mind, and chanting powerful phrases called mantras.
And maybe the most famous mantra of all is this one, Om Mani Padme Hum. You've probably heard it. This single phrase is really a cornerstone of the tradition. It's said to contain the compassion of all the Buddhas. It's just a perfect example of how sound and recitation are used as these incredibly powerful tools for personal transformation in Vajrayana.
And Vajrayana has had a huge influence in the West, especially through Tibetan Buddhism. Pema Chodron, a really respected American nun and teacher, is a leading voice in this lineage today. She's done so much to make these deep teachings about compassion understandable for a modern audience.
So there you have it. From an oral tradition kept alive only by human memory to three major global branches, we've seen how one single source can lead to so many different paths. And what's amazing is that each branch, even though it's so distinct, still carries the heart of the original teaching, which kind of leaves us with one last thought. What does this incredible journey of adaptation really teach us about the power of ideas themselves, how they can transform and yet somehow endure across thousands of years?